Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. She was a normal housewife, close to turning 40, newly pregnant with her second child. No, maybe she wasn't quite normal. Her first daughter was already only a year away from high school, so there would be an almost 15-year gap between her children. She was also worried that her daughter, who was currently going through puberty, would rebel against having a younger sister, but in fact her daughter was overjoyed. Her husband was a scientist, and between his faith and his research, he only rarely came home. But whenever he was home, he did his best to be a good father and a good husband. So, while she certainly had her complaints, her love for her husband was firm. The second child was born uneventfully. She was a healthy young girl who weighed 2,579 grams at birth. She named the girl Mana. Unfortunately, after that, her husband was transferred to a new location far away from home. Her husband wouldn't last a week without someone to do the chores and make the food, so she had no choice but to send her older daughter along with him. She was now alone with her newborn daughter, Mana. At her husband's suggestion, the two of them moved into housing owned by the company he worked for, so rent was extremely low. Her family had originally lived in a condo in the suburbs, but it was far from the city center and hard to get anywhere. The dorm, however, was located right in the heart of Shibuya, and many of her husband's colleagues lived nearby. She'd have easy access to childcare, and if anything came up, she'd have people around who could help her. The place was extremely spacious. The bedroom especially was a favorite of hers. A huge mirror covered a whole wall, and on the other side, there was a big window. From there, you could look down onto Yoyogi Park. She quickly became friends with the ladies in the nearby residences, and the corporate benefits even included a maid. She was proud that her husband was important enough in the company for her to have all these benefits, and was more than satisfied with her life of luxury. 2 years passed. Mana's development was a little slow, but she was growing up without suffering any major illnesses. She was, however, a very needy child. If she wasn't constantly held at her mother's breast, she'd start crying immediately. For the past month or so, Mana's mother hadn't been feeling well at all. The ringing in her ears was the worst part. It bothered her almost the whole day. But still, she couldn't let the maid or the lady next door take care of Mana. Mana couldn't stand to be away from her for a second. Not in the bathroom, not when taking a bath. Whenever she even thought of letting the maid hold her for a second, Mana would somehow know and start crying. It was, in a way, endearing to have the young child so reliant on her, but it also meant that she couldn't leave the house for an instant. The maid and her neighbor, though, were there to help. She was so lucky to have them. Of course, things were gradually getting strange with them, too. A week ago, she had been talking with her neighbor in the living room when the woman had suddenly started to vomit without warning. She quickly fled afterwards, running outside of the house. Mana's mother hadn't seen the neighbor at all after that, so perhaps she'd gotten sick. Mana's mother then decided to ask her maid to go check on the neighbor. The maid was just finishing up for the day when she'd made the request. When she'd finished it with, "And I'll see you tomorrow," the maid suddenly began to cry. The maid just nodded over and over again before leaving. And that night, Mana's mother suffered terribly as the ringing in her ears got even more violent than before, and the pain threatened to split her head open. She tried to call an ambulance, but the phones didn't work. She tried to go get the neighbor lady to help, but even that was too difficult. Her daughter started to cry violently, and the crying made the pain worse. She held Mana tight to her chest, enduring the pain. Suddenly, the crying and the ringing in her ears stopped. The pain in her head was gone, like it was never there. She looked down and saw she was holding the shriveled corpse of a child. Before she realized the whole thing was an experiment, her mind broke into a million pieces. An experiment had been performed, but it wasn't what he had expected it to be. He was a scientist at Nozomi Technologies and a believer in the cosmic church of the Divine Light. He was one of the key figures behind Nozomi Tech's secret Project Noah, and the one who'd solve the riddle of fun to the 10th times int to the 40th equals IR2. He had offered his pregnant wife as a test subject for the experiment. It was a direct order from the church's leader, a person he admired deeply, but he had also been the one to suggest it to make the experiment a success. It was called the Mana experiment, after the code name given to his wife's daughter. His older daughter was given to a church facility, while he monitored his sequestered wife and Mana 24 hours a day. What his wife had thought was a company-owned condo was, in fact, a Nozomi Technologies testing facility, and the location of the Noah 2 prototype that he was working on. Mind reading, inducing hallucinations, sensory control. His wife and daughter would be used to test the efficacy of these technologies here in this sealed lab. The effects of electromagnetic radiation on the body were ill understood, and he had planned to cancel the experiments if anything unusual happened to his wife and daughter. An accident occurred almost immediately. Mana died roughly a month after being born. The cause of her death was unknown. It was an accident, one that nobody could prevent. He was deeply saddened and tried to cancel the experiment, but that wasn't going to happen. And that's what his employer had said. The man had been looking at the strange goings-on in the test lab. His wife had refused to accept the reality of her daughter's death and treated her corpse like it was still alive. In fact, from his wife's perspective, she was. This was an effect of the Noah 2 prototype, and, in a sense, the perfect chance to test its abilities. His feelings on the matter were irrelevant, and before long, he too began to feel that his wife would be better off if the experiment continued. As he watched his wife through the one-way mirror cradling his daughter's corpse, it seemed like she was happy with her life. She'd stare at the wallpaper on the opposite side, which looked to her like a window overlooking Yoyogi Park, and whisper softly to her daughter. Two of the research staff took care of her. One would pretend to be a maid, and the other the lady next door. As long as the experiment continued, his wife's mind would be just fine. She was, he told himself, what was best for her. Perhaps his mind had broken before hers. And the more time passed, the more his goal changed from the completion of Noah 2 to keeping his wife locked within her dream. And then, after almost 2 years, his employer's word suddenly brought all that to an end.
ノア2本格稼働は間近です。この実験ももう続ける意味はないでしょう。
He fought back as hard as he could, but as a result, he was branded a traitor and removed from the project. As a final thanks for his service, he was allowed to be in the experiment room, hands tied on the day it was shut down. His daughter, whom he hadn't seen for nearly 2 years, had been brought there as well. When she saw him, she seemed confused.
父さん、これはどういうこと？母さんに何をしたの？母さんが抱いているのは一体。
He couldn't answer. The guilt kept him from even looking her in the eye. The horrible ceremony was about to begin. The neighbor lady had already become unable to tolerate the stench, and the maid had run out of the lab weeping at his wife's words. The device was shut down. The dream ended. And his wife broke. At the sight of her daughter suddenly turning into a desiccated corpse, at least that's how it must have seemed to her, she snapped, tearing out her hair and ripping the skin off her face with her nails. She began to laugh madly, slamming her face again and again into the walls, before grabbing a knife and killing herself by stabbing out her own eyes. Her daughter was screaming and crying as she watched her mother's last moments through the one-way mirror. The lab staff grabbed his daughter by the arms and dragged her off somewhere. He didn't know where. He wasn't even allowed to follow the only family he had left.
すまない。すまない。
He blamed himself. It was all his fault. Whatever his reasons, he'd opted to continue the experiment 2 years prior. It had been obvious that this was how it was going to end. Several days after watching his wife's death, he disappeared. Nobody knew where he was now. Senna had ended up running off on her own, after angrily asking Kozupi some kind of questions. Kozupi had gone after Senna. I had no idea what made her suddenly go crazy. Now I was slowly trudging through Shimokitazawa. It was almost home. I was almost home. It wasn't even 30 minutes from the base. Was Nanami there? Shimokitazawa's streets were busy, though not as busy as Shibuya. The psychic boy incident was still fresh in people's memories. Some would point and laugh at me, while others would even take pictures with their cell phones. I hurried home as fast as I could, suffering the feelings of embarrassment and humiliation.
ごめんね。
Mimi was walking a little behind me, her eyes locked on the ground below as she whispered. She'd said that at least 10 times on the way here.
黙ってて。ごめん。
There was nothing I could say. I didn't understand Rimi. That had always been the case. Rimi had been there to support me. She'd been there for me. But there was so much about her I didn't understand. Until now, I'd always opted to just ignore it. Maybe that's because it felt like if any of those things I didn't understand ever came out in the open, Rimi would go away. And I was afraid of that.
どうして僕と一緒にいてくれるの？
I managed to work up the courage to ask that single question. Why would Rimi want to be anywhere near a guy like me? Was it because she was like Yua and trying to set me up for a fall? But the answer wasn't what I expected.
あなたに目覚めてほしくないの。普通の生活を送ってほしかった。
She didn't want me to wake up? To awaken as a giglomaniac? Is that what she meant? Rimi knew more about me than I did myself.
一体君は何者なの？
私は
Rimi hesitated.
私はタクの友達だって思ってる。友達でいたいな。
Did that mean she didn't want to ask me any more questions? But I had to ask.
僕はギガロマニアックスなの。
そうとも言えるし、違うとも言える。
Which was it? Was she trying to confuse me?
君は IR2 のこと知ってたの？
聞いたことがあるだけ。
She didn't say who told her about it.
セナが言ってたのは本当なの？
嘘だよ。
She was lying. She was lying when she said it was a lie. I could tell just by looking at her.
君は
I went to ask her another question, but stopped. Was Rimi on my side or my enemy? If I asked and got the wrong answer, she might leave me forever, so I couldn't ask. If I just pretended nothing had happened, if I just let her lie to me, everything would go back to how it was before. That'd be easier. I'd be happier that way, maybe. Yeah, I could just do that. I could pretend to be an idiot. I could just let her keep lying to me. She'd saved me enough times that she probably wasn't going to hurt me in the future. All I had to do was give her what she wanted and lead a normal life.
ありがとう。
I looked away from her and thanked her instead of asking her a question.
守ってくれて。
タク、
I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just silently followed the path home. Soon I came to a street I recognized. It was in a cramped, quiet neighborhood. Once in a while, you could hear the sound of the trains in the distance. I'd known this place since I was a little kid. This was where I'd grown up. I'd followed the same road to elementary school and to middle school. And I just had to turn down the narrow street in front of me, and home would be right there. I was scared to face Nanami, but I had to see whether her arm was still attached. I stopped and took a deep breath to calm myself. Then I went to take a step forward when...
待って。
I turned back to see Rimi was looking at me. She was on the verge of tears.
どうしても行くの。 ねえ、行かないで。もう、普通じゃいられなくなるよ。私、そんなの嫌だな。
What did that mean?
帰ろう。あのコンテナハウスに。帰ろう。私、タクが望む限り、ずっと一緒にいるから。それで、一緒に学校に行って、大臣と3人で、他愛もない話をして、帰りに立ち食い蕎麦屋さんとか、CD ショップとかに寄って、そうやって、これからもやっていこうよ。
僕は、ナナミに会わなくちゃ。
いないよ。きっと。
How would she know? Was she lying again? Was there a reason she didn't want me going to my parents' house?
私、タクの悲しむ顔、見たくない。
Not again.
もう、謎かけみたいなことはやめてよ。
I was just sick of it all. Was I supposed to just never understand what was going on around me? I couldn't keep playing dumb even if I wanted to. Everybody kept throwing mysteries in my face. I just wanted to remain ignorant.
実家に行っちゃいけない理由があるなら言ってよ。こんな中途半端なのうんざりなんだ。
Sick of it? I was the one who'd always decided to do things halfway, wasn't I? I was the one who would run away from things. That's right. I should just keep doing what I've always been doing. I should just go home. Rimi was right. I didn't need to see Nanami. If I went to see her and she was missing her right hand, what was I even supposed to do about it? It'd be my fault, wouldn't it? Nanami would hate me. She'd despise me. I'd be the loser who couldn't save his little sister. I'd know for sure just how pathetic I was. If I kept everything vague and uncertain, I wouldn't feel guilty. Yeah, I should just do that. That was the best move. Don't look at anything. No matter how many mysteries people shove in my face, I could just ignore them all. I could hide myself away from the whole world.
ほんと、世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと、なんにもできないんだから。
ダメだ。
In my head, I heard Nanami's bright, cheerful voice.
ダメだよ。
If I ran away here, I'd never be able to face Nanami again. I'd never be able to come here again.
タク、
I clenched my fist and stepped onto the narrow street that led to my old home. It was less than 50 meters away. At first, my pace was brisk. Then I ran. I headed towards the home where I'd grown up. 30 meters. 20 meters. 10 meters. 0 meters. And the house I knew so well. Wasn't there.
あれ
The name on the plate was different. It didn't say Nishijo. The house looked different too. It was much nicer, much newer than the house I'd lived in. I looked around. I thought maybe I just stopped at the wrong house. But I was wrong. And besides that, nothing around me matched what I remembered. I thought for a moment that maybe I'd gotten lost or gone down the wrong street, but that was impossible. Everything on the way here had been just as I remembered it. The path here was the same. But my home wasn't here. I'd followed the path in my memories, but what I remembered being here wasn't here at all. Instead, it was something else. I was seeing something new. I should know this place well, but it was like I was coming here for the first time.
シャメビューだ。
違うよ。
Rimi was standing right behind me. Her words were an instant rejection.
この世界に。タクの帰る場所は、ないの。
The light from the setting sun fell into the hospital hallway. This time of day was particularly dark. It was just before night fell, and the lights hadn't been turned on yet. The chaos and noise of dinner time had subsided, and an almost eerie silence descended in its place. Shogun was slowly moving down the hallway in his wheelchair. The sound of The creaking wheels echoed throughout the corridor. He passed several nurses on the way, but none of them looked at him or spoke. Shogun, for his part, didn't seem to find this unusual at all. Frail hands, seemingly made of nothing but skin and bone, turned the wheels again and again. As he passed one of the rooms, a patient named Yamai began to scream. He pointed at Shogun, shouting frantically. There happened to be a nurse in his room. She looked terribly confused. The nurse looked around and chuckled. Shogun was right in front of her with his wheelchair, but still, she said nobody was there.
また山井さんは私のことからかってるんでしょう。でも今日は騙されませんからね。
アミーだ。ラウミーだ。タウミーだ。
Yamai kept screaming and getting angrier and angrier. Shogun ignored him and continued down the hallway, turning right. The cream-colored wall suddenly became black. Shogun didn't hesitate for even a moment before the wall. He kept going forward, and just before it seemed like he would hit it, the wall vanished. It simply disappeared and revealed the hallway behind it. Shogun kept going forward. The hallway went on for about 20 more meters before ending, this time for real. There was a single door which opened into a room. Shogun opened the door and went inside. It was a room that didn't exist, the one that there had been rumors and ghost stories about in the hospital for years. And the nameplate on the outside door was Takumi Nishijo. Chapter 9, Gigalomaniac. The sky outside the train car was turning dark. The Yamanote line car was packed with salarymen heading home from work and students heading home from school. Yua Kusunoki and Yasujiban were standing next to each other, hanging on to the straps as the train rumbled and shook. They made a strange pair, and Yua had been glancing around for a while now to see if they'd attracted anyone's attention. She kept fiddling nervously with her hair and glasses. She just met Bon a few days ago and wasn't up to making friendly conversation with him. There was only one stop between Harajuku and Shibuya, but the 3 minutes it took to go between them felt far, far longer than it usually did. Bon was silently looking out the window. He made no attempt to speak to her. In Yua's mind, Bon wasn't a bad person, but he was a little scary. She'd met several police officers after what had happened with her sister and didn't have a high opinion of any of them. Maybe that's what made her feel awkward around Bon. That's how she saw it anyway.
だから地下15階の番人倒せば隠し団長いけるだろ常識的に考えて
番人どこにいるかわからんなり
The two men standing in the doors had been talking in loud voices ever since she got on at Harajuku. They were making no effort to avoid disturbing the other passengers, and Yua was forced to listen to their conversation.
マップの左端の方だよ一目でわかるだろ番人
っていうか番人と警官の区別つかないぞなもし
いやいやどう見ても番人だろどこが警官なんだよ番人は銃持ってねえよ
They were wearing unfashionable clothes with bandanas on their heads. They wore fingerless gloves and had tightly packed backpacks on their backs. They were the type commonly called otaku. As an anime and manga fan herself, Yua wasn't really bothered by their appearance. But she'd never been to Akihabara before, and she'd never seen someone dressed like such a stereotypical otaku before. She took a few glances at this rare sight before realizing how rude she was being. She quickly looked away. In the seat in front of her was a teenage girl with brown hair and a blue blazer. She was typing into her phone, her fingers done up with gaudy fake nails. Every time she moved her fingers, the strap on the phone dangled. It had a tiny plastic gun at the end of it. Yua saw what the girl was writing. The girl was holding it at a bizarrely flat angle. It was almost as if she was trying to make sure Yua saw it. Went to a party last night with this cop and it sucked. Lamest old dude I've ever met. Hope he dies. Yua was the girl's age, but she couldn't understand it all. It was probably just how some girls talked when they were on the phone, but to her it looked like some kind of code. Suddenly, a child's voice echoed loudly through the car. Yua turned towards the voice in surprise. It was a 5-year-old kid standing next to Bon. He was holding a toy water pistol and pointing it at Bon. He was pulling the trigger, but water wasn't coming out. Bon gave the child a grin. His eyes weren't laughing at all, but the child didn't seem scared in the slightest.
ノブ君やめなさい。
Someone who appeared to be the child's mother came over. She bowed shallowly in Bon's direction.
すいません。バーンバーン。ノブ君やめなさいって。
The mother's voice was stern, but all she was doing was warning him. She didn't try to take the gun or make him put it down.
バーンバーンバーン。あ、本当にすいません。
ああ、構いませんよ。
バーンバーンバーン。おじさんが困ってるでしょう、ノブ君。
Something seemed really strange about the whole scene to Yua. The mother was making an angry face at her child and looking apologetically at Bon, but that was all.
バーンバーンバーン。やめなさい、怒るわよ。バーンバーンバーン。
The child seemed completely oblivious to her pleas. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over again, like a broken toy. His mother still wasn't making any real effort to stop him.
本当にすいません。バーンバーンバーン。
Bon, for some reason, made no effort to stop the child.
バーンバーンバーン。
This continued all the way to Shibuya. The train stopped at Shibuya Station and the doors opened. The kid and his mom made no effort to get off. Relieved, Yua stepped off the train with Bon. She looked at him and saw he was chuckling.
お急ぎ中のお客様にお知らせいたします。地下鉄番号門線。失礼しました。半蔵門線は人身事故の影響でただいま振り替え運転を行っております。お客様には大変ご迷惑をおかけして申し訳ございません。
最近よく感じるんだが。
Rows of people were walking past them on the platform. As they joined the crowd heading for the Hachiko exit, Bon suddenly whispered to Yua.
まるで不特定多数の人間にストーカーされてるような気がするんだよな。
どういうことですか？
さっきみたいなことがよくあるって話さ。周囲の人間の何気ない行動がまるで自分への嫌がらせじゃねえかって思えてくるわけ。
That's why Bon hadn't said anything about the child's mischief. Little things like that were happening all the time lately. If he let each one bother him, he'd go crazy fast.
まあ、考えすぎだろうが、俺みたいな地味なおっさんに興味があるやつなんてそうそういねえだろうし。ただ、集団ストーカーってのは確かに存在するんだよな。
普通のストーカー行為とは何が違うんですか？
被害を受けてる側からすると、相手の意図や目的、正体すら全くわかんねえんだ。ただ、誰かに行く先々で毎日のように様々な嫌がらせを受けていると感じる。集団ストーカーってのはそういうもんだ。
ただの考えすぎっていう可能性は？
十分にあり得るだろうな。脅迫観念と紙一重だ。俺の場合はそうでもなさそうなんだけどな。ここ数日は相手もかなり直接的な手段に出てきてやがる。
と言いますと？
手を引けって脅迫する匿名の電話が 何度かかかってきてな。
For some reason, Bon had a smile on his face as he spoke. Yua felt more scared than he seemed to be. She crossed her arms over her chest.
それ、大丈夫なんですか？
大丈夫なんですか？
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 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？ 大丈夫なんですか？
まあ、デカにはよくあることさ。
He spoke casually, but as he regarded her, the look on his face became more serious.
ユアちゃんは最近そんなようなことはないかい？
はい。ないと思います。
身の回りでちょっとでも違和感を覚えることがあったらすぐにおじさんに言ってくれ。ユアちゃんの身の安全を守るのは警察の仕事だからな。
はい。
You realized that she may have gotten into something more dangerous than she thought.
あなたは妄想の存在なんだよ。
That's what Remy said, but I didn't have a clue what she meant. I ignored her and began to look at the houses around me. I remembered this place. I'd never seen this place before. The house that should be here wasn't. The house that shouldn't be here was. The gap between my memories and reality became more and more stark in the light of the evening sun.
ずれてなんかない。
I said this aloud, desperately trying to deny the despair in my heart. That's right, nothing was wrong at all. I'd just gone down the wrong street. I was being silly. Nothing was wrong with the world at all. How could there be? I ran back the way I came and headed down the next street over. But again, there was a gap between my memories and what I saw. I realized my whole body was soaked with an awful sweat. It was like I was suffering from vertigo, like my legs weren't touching the ground. It felt like I was going to throw up.
なんでだよ。ここに僕の家があるのは間違いないんだ。僕はいつもここから小学校にも中学校にも通ってたんだ。小学校にはナナミと手をつないで登校してたし、中学は自転車で。
どこの中学校？
Remy had caught up to me. Her voice was quiet.
どこって。
なんていう学校？
そんなの決まってるじゃないか。地元の。
What was that its name again?
あれ。
I couldn't remember. I'd gone to middle school, I remember that much, but the details weren't clear. It was like there was a fog in my head that was keeping me from seeing them. The name of the school, which class I was in, my teachers' names. I couldn't remember any specific names at all.
そんなはずないんだ。ただ忘れてるだけで。
タク、聞いて。あなたの記憶にあるのは、この場所に家があるじゃなくて、この場所に家があるはずっていう思い込み。そうでしょ？
I felt like I was going to go crazy.
だって僕はここに来るまでの道は覚えてるんだぞ。おかしいじゃないか。
それは作られた記憶だから。
Don't make that face. Mimi's eyes were downcast. She looked sad as she lied to me. It was more stuff I didn't understand, stuff I couldn't understand. I gave up on thinking.
タクは中学には通ってないの。
わかったぞ。これドッキリでしょ。そうなんでしょ。きっとあれだ。そう、リミとナナミが実は知り合いとかで僕を二人して騙そうとしてるんだ。なんだ。そうか。ビビった。
I was trying to laugh it off, but Remy didn't even grin.
ごめん。私、これからあなたを傷つけることを言わなくちゃ。タク、あなたはね、本来、いちゃいけない存在なんだよ。
嘘つくな！
Remy was lying to me. She was my enemy too.
貼り付けはリミの仕業だな。
When I'd seen her then, it hadn't been a delusion at all. The NewGen killer wasn't the man I'd seen on TV. It was Remy. She'd been watching me the whole time to make sure I didn't tell anybody the truth. That's why she'd stayed with me.
君はあの時血まみれだった。だから君が犯人だ。
あれはあなたの望んだ妄想。ギガロマニアックスの妄想はね、強すぎる場合時に混じり合うの。妄想がシンクロするんだ。
She spoke, quietly, as if to make sure I heard. Her calm demeanor just made me even more upset.
少なくともあの時、あの場所では4つの妄想がシンクロしてた。タクと、私と、ニュージェネの犯人と。
信じるもんか。
I cut her off. I put my hands tight over my ears. I closed my eyes.
これは妄想だ。そうだよ、妄想なんだ。いつもしているみたいな。
妄想はしないで。
Her voice was quiet and plaintive, but it was an order. I gulped.
でないと私、タクを消さなくちゃいけなくなる。
殺すの？
Terror ran down my spine. In my mind, Remy was changing from my savior into some strange creature I didn't understand.
殺すんだな。やっぱり君が殺人犯なんだ。
Why do you keep looking at me like that? Biting your lip, looking down like you're about to cry. It makes it hard to get mad at you. Tell me it was all a lie. Smile and ask me if you fooled me. And then we can go back to how things were before. I want to go back.
だったら僕は何なの？
ギガロマニアックスの妄想によって作られた人間かな。
バカらしい。僕にはちゃんと記憶があるんだ。中学の頃の細かい記憶は思い出せないけど、忘れちゃっただけで。
あなたが生まれたのは1年半前なの。
A year and a half ago? That would be right when I started high school.
だったら僕は1歳半の赤ん坊っていうことじゃないか。バブ言ってなくちゃおかしい。
タクは生まれた瞬間からタクだった。
君がその目で見たって言いたいの？確かに僕らは1年半前から友達だったらしいね。僕は覚えてないけど。
私とあなたが会ったのは1ヶ月前。貼り付けの現場。私はもともと水明の生徒じゃないから。
Remy was crazy. Remy was crazy, just like the rest of them. She was super crazy, even crazier than Senna and Ayase.
誰が僕を妄想したの？言ってみてよ。
西条匠くんだよ。
入ったアウト。僕が妄想なんでしょ。その僕が妄想して僕を作ったって矛盾してるじゃないか。はい論破終了。それとも君の妄想？君が勝手に作り出した君だけの脳内設定なんでしょ。僕をそれに巻き込まないでよ。
私だってタクには知ってほしくなかった。ここにも来てほしくなかった。もっと強く引き止めればよかったね。
She looked up. Her face was firm. Her eyes were gazing straight at me. She had a deadly serious look about them, and they were filled with light. She didn't look like she was lying at all.
でもここまで来たら本当のことを知ってもらった方がいいと思う。
But this is a lie. This was all a lie. It had to be a lie. If it wasn't, I'd go crazy. Who could believe a person who suddenly told them they were a delusion?
あなたの行動が他の人の命を削っていくんだって 知ってもらった方が。
そうだ。ななみは僕が妄想だったら、僕と血が繋がってるななみも両親も妄想ってこと？そんなの無茶苦茶。
ナナちゃんはいるよ。
The way she was talking, it was almost like she knew Nanami.
ななみを誘拐したのは君なの。
似たようなものかもね。私はタクを守ることに気を取られすぎて、ナナちゃんが狙われる可能性を考えてなかった。私は誘拐犯のこと知ってる。
I knew it. She was the demon girl, just like I thought at first. I wanted Rimi at least to be on my side, but that wish had let me keep believing for so long. There had been any number of things that should have made me suspicious. I kept closing my eyes to all of them so I could believe her when she said she'd stay with me. But in the end, she was just like Yua.
君も僕を裏切るんだね。
そうだね。私はタクを裏切った。隠し事をたくさんしてた。ごめんね。私のこと恨んでいいよ。
謝られたって。僕は信じない。信じられない。
But despite what I was saying, I couldn't prove that I was real. All the strange supernatural things I'd seen so far came flashing back to me. Could I really be sure that what Rimi was saying was crazy? Rimi slowly walked up to me and held me tight. It caught me off guard. I didn't resist. Her warmth. It had saved me when I was in trouble. It had kept my mind from breaking. It had taught me kindness. But now, even as she held me in her arms, her warmth felt very far away.
そろそろ行かなきゃ。
行くって、どこへ？
ナナちゃんをさらった誘拐犯のところ。決着つけなくちゃいけないの。ナナちゃんのことも他のことも。このままだとタクも守りきれないし。
そんなの無責任だ。僕にここまでひどいこと言っておいて逃げるの？
Rimi moved away from me, a step, and then another step. Little by little, she put more and more distance between us.
戻ってくるから、タクは部屋にいて。そしたらまた一緒にいろいろ楽しいお話ししよう。あなたはあそこにいてもいいんだよ。
Her voice was kind. After all the horrible things she'd said, how could she be kind again?
でも一つだけ約束。もう妄想はしない。ね。タクの妄想力はとっても強いから。妄想すればするほど本物のあなたの命が削られていっちゃうんだ。
何を？
それじゃあまた明日。石。
She gave me a salute and a smile that seemed very, very out of place. But then right after that, the silent tears began to fall from her eyes. She quickly turned her back to me and ran, shoulders shaking. I watched her go, stunned, and then collapsed to my knees.
本物の僕ってなんだよ。僕は偽物じゃない。
All the color seemed to have gone out of the world. There was no hope to be found. I'd been denied my very existence. My life had no meaning. Not even my death had any meaning. Rimi had gone and left my useless self behind. She was my enemy too. She'd been lying to me. And now that she told me everything, there was no reason for her to stay with me anymore.
戻ってくるはずない。
Rimi had abandoned me because I'm just a delusion, supposedly. I'm just a monster. It didn't even matter. Nothing mattered. I didn't even have the strength to stand up. I still couldn't get any of what she'd said straight in my head. I was so shocked I couldn't even cry. The cold twilight wind was stealing the heat from my body. Even the little bit of warmth that Rimi had left was gone. I looked up at the sky for no reason at all, and the twilight had almost entirely turned to night.
これが新作？またへんてこね。
Momose stared at the Ghetto Froggy keychain that Bon had bought and smiled.
でも可愛いじゃない？
そりゃ新作じゃねえよ。先週出たなんだっけ。
Bon gave you a look that was begging for help.
涙目ゲロカエルンです。
ああ、そう。それ。
ごめんね、ひわちゃん。こんなむさ苦しいおじさんに付き合わされて大変だったでしょ
いえ。
ひでえな、ももちゃん。こんなダンディーな中年はなかなかいねえぜ。
Momose was, however, not interested in Bon's comments in the slightest. She ignored him and brought Yua a cup of tea herself. Bon sighed and sat in a chair as he looked around the office. Previous employees usually worked late, but today they'd all gone home right as the workday ended. The schedule on the whiteboard showed that none of them were working overtime today. With the office empty, it was as quiet as midnight.
で、ももちゃん、進行のこと調べてくれたかい？
Before he'd gotten on the train at Harajuku, Bon had called Momose and asked her to investigate the company.
う。その前に、
Momose gave Yua a happy smile.
ひわちゃん、お茶を飲んだら帰った方がいいわ。
え？
日も暮れたし、ご両親が心配するでしょ。
Yua could tell what Momose was thinking. What they were about to discuss wasn't safe for an ordinary girl like Yua to hear.
私のこと心配してくれているんですか？
ええ、そうよ。
Momose's face took on a grave look, and she nodded. Yua was grateful, but shook her head.
私、帰りません。ミヤちゃんの死の真相に近づくためなら、何だってするつもりです。
あなたはこれ以上関わるべきじゃないわ。
私もとっくに当事者の一人です。
There was a strength in her words that made it clear she wasn't going to change her mind. Momose was surprised at this unexpected refusal.
意外と頑固ね。
ま、ここでのけ者にするのも酷ってもんだろ。いざとなったら警察で保護するさ。
Momose let out a deep sigh at Bon's unconcerned attitude.
バンちゃんにそんな権力があるのかしらね。
ま、こう見えても一応天下の警視庁捜査一課所属だからな。
あら、そう。
Momose ignored him and turned to stare at Yua.
これから聞くことは絶対に口外しちゃダメよ。これはあなたの命にも関わることだから、それを肝に銘じてね。
はい。
Yua nodded, a tense look on her face. Momose looked at her and sighed one more time before settling back into her seat. Her plump body became even rounder as she leaned over her laptop.
で、進行から何が出たんだい？
バンちゃんの予感的中って感じね。
Bon and Yua looked at her monitor from over her shoulder.
有限会社新興の親会社はのぞみテクノロジーよ。
のぞみテクノロジ
ー？のぞみグループか。こいつは驚きだな。
新興は5年前にのぞみグループに吸収合併されたんだけど、それ以降発売した商品が次々と大ヒットしてるのよ。ゲロカエルンだけじゃないの。 中国製バッグとか、タイ製のエコバッグとか、美脚パンツとか。で、この会社は商品の売り出し方が独特なの。いつも週末に新製品を一斉に投入するのよ。
The weekend. Bond's ears pricked up when he heard the word.
G レートとの関係は？
必然にしろ偶然にしろ、新興の商品がヒットしているのは G レートの変動の影響ね。それは確かよ。前に見せた G レートのグラフ覚えてる？ 5 年ぐらい前からずっと毎週末に値が上がってるって言ったわよね。新興がのぞみグループに合併された時期とぴったり一致するわ。
新興がレートを操作してると思うか？
新興自体はそんなに大きな会社じゃないからそれは無理よ。
となると親会社のぞみが怪しいな。グループ総出で取り組めばレート操作だってできそうじゃねえか。
待って、のぞみの方はもちろんだけど、新興が興味深いのはそこだけじゃないの。設立当初の資料にまで遡ってみたら、すごい大物が出てきたのよ。
大物？
井ノ原幸三。
はっは、明和党の重鎮じゃねえの。
新興設立当時はまだ民自党在籍時代だけどね。
つながってきたな。太田教授の時、それとこの前の地震の時、明和党は G レートに関係ありそうな件について報道規制の圧力をかけてきてる。
All right. Why don't we stop it there? This is audap watching Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.